Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Jordan and today we are going to be talking about my favorite thing, tropes. In today's episode of Trope Talk, we're going to be talking about my top 3 character pet peeves of women in YA. This is specifically in sci-fi, fantasy, action-adventure, and dystopian, though it does apply to other genres of the YA world as well. A little disclaimer before we begin, I am a feminist 100%, but I am going about this in the storytelling way and not in the feminist way. So I'm going to talk to you about why I think these tropes are aspects of lazy storytelling, are things that are overused or cliche, and why I think novels would be stronger without the use of these cliches in them. So let's begin. Also, these are in no particular order, they all bother me equally. So, number 1, the damsel in distress. Now this is a trope that everyone is familiar with. It has been a theme, a cliche, a trope since the dawn of storytelling, and honestly, I don't mind it sometimes. It's very prevalent in older storytelling, but it's still used in storytelling today, which I will talk about in a moment. So, the damsel in distress is a woman who is being saved by a man, usually the protagonist. Now this woman is generally very beautiful and oftentimes is very weak, or at least not strong enough to overcome the obstacles that the protagonist will then overcome to save her. Now my problem with this trope is that it is lazy storytelling when it is overused. So I actually don't mind it personally when it's used once in a story. I think that, characters build trust and relationships through helping each other out, and as long as it's done well and not overdone, I don't mind it. But if it is used more than once in the same story, or if the woman is being saved only for her looks and not because they have a relationship, if there's no basis for her being saved besides her being beautiful, that's when I start to have a problem with it. I also find that in a lot of stories, which I find really frustrating when there's strong female characters, which I'll get to next, the protagonist generally starts out being the strong female character who can overcome obstacles, and as the story progresses or the series progresses, she will generally revert back to the damsel in distress. So she starts out strong, and then as the story progresses, she becomes weaker or she gets saved constantly by her male counterparts. Examples of the damsel in distress trope is Twilight. Bella is constantly being saved by either Jacob or Edward. It does make sense in the context because she is the only human versus all these supernatural forces, but it's super repetitive and becomes a little lazy on Stephanie Meyer's part. I understand in Breaking Dawn there's a little bit of a break of that when she does become a vampire, but it still feels like she's constantly being saved by Edward or Jacob. What bothers me more is my second example, and this is Katniss in the Hunger Games. In the first book, Katniss is a total badass. She's overcoming all these obstacles, she's a fighter, she's strong, she's powerful, and then in Catching Fire and in Mockingjay, the guys are always trying to save her. Now, the author also tries to give context to this. She can't die because she is the image of the rebellion, and it inspires people to rise up against the Capitol. But it is endless. She's constantly being saved by Gale or Finnick or Peeta or whoever. And this drives me mental because it's like she was so strong and powerful and now she's just constantly being saved by men. It totally devalues her as a strong female character, as a strong woman. Which leads me to trope number 2, the strong female character. Now, don't get me wrong, I love women who are powerful, who, are strong in different ways, who have deep characters and well-rounded characters. I love seeing that in stories. What I hate is that since the Hunger Games, there's been a cookie-cutter strong female character mold that everyone seems to want to follow. Now this strong female character is physically strong, generally very beautiful. She is a little emotionally unavailable, usually because of scars in her past related to her family. She has abandonment issues and trust issues, but is physically strong, and that negates her emotional kind of weakness based on traumatic experiences, but they're all the same. And I don't mind a female character being strong and powerful and physically can do stuff that's awesome. But what I hate is that they're all the same in recent years. I want to see ingenuity, I want to see creativity, and I think Selena Sardothian from the Throne of Glass series tries to break that, but I think she is a terrible example of how to break the mold, and I'm actually going to do a book review on that soon, so stay tuned. But I just find that there's no creativity in these characters. They're all very similar and it's a little bit lazy. It's just trying to keep up with the demand for female characters that are stronger ever since the Hunger Games. So an example of this obviously is Katniss, because I've been talking about her, but Triss from the Divergent series is a perfect example of this. Clary is a bit of an example of this from the Mortal Instrument series, and these aren't books, but Rey and Jyn from the new Star Wars movies are perfect examples of this. And I'm actually thinking of doing a video on the Star Wars movies and what I liked and disliked about all of them. So if you are interested in seeing that, please comment down below. Before we get to our third and final trope, I want to give a couple honorable mentions, one of which is of course the "I'm so plain and boring and ugly," but when she describes herself, she is an actual supermodel and all the guys love her. Last time I checked, if you were plain and boring and ugly, you wouldn't have guys falling left, right, and center for you. Also, I find that the "I'm so plain and boring" descriptions are added onto a vanilla character who is supposed to be, I think, relatable. So she just doesn't have a personality and guys are just falling for her left, right, and center because there's supposed to be a certain level of compatibility between people when they, you know, fall in love. So to have all these like romantic love triangles or squares or hectagons or like whatever, because they just seem to have endless amounts of guys just pouring over them, they just make very flat, kind of vague characters that are very vanilla and just don't have much of a personality at all, so that they're compatible with all these different people. But what ends up happening is that they're just really boring and it drives me insane because it's so lazy and so overdone. Look at Bella from the Twilight series. "Oh, I'm so plain. I have such big brown eyes and long luscious brown hair. I don't know why Edward and Jacob are falling for me." It needs to stop. The second honorable mention that I have is the mean girl whose only purpose is to break up the main character and her romantic partner in the story. She's usually very beautiful and is usually dating the man before or during the beginning of the book, or at least has a crush on him at the beginning of the book. Her only purpose is to be mean to the main character and to try to split up the main character and her romantic love interest, or to provide an obstacle to their romance. This drives me crazy. It's so lazy, it's so overdone, it's so boring, and it just adds a certain level of dislikability to the main character and the guy, especially if they're dating at the beginning, because usually when it's a monogamous relationship, you don't flirt with other women. That leads me to the last and final trope that drives me crazy. The virgin. But not just a virgin. These women are naive and often childish or immature compared to the other women in the story who have a little bit more sexual experience. And I get it. There are a lot of young women who are immature and who are young and act young, but it shouldn't be directly correlated to the amount of sexual experience that a character has. There are so many teenage girls who have zero sexual experience and are very mature and are very complex. These girls are prized for their virginity, but at the same time treated like children. It's just this weird thing that I find in stories all the time, and it's really odd. It's a lot more subtle than some of the other tropes, but it's definitely there, and it drives me crazy because the two things are not necessarily related, and they should stop being related in stories because that seems to be a trope across the board, not only in YA, but in storytelling in general, and I just want it to stop. Alright guys, so that is all. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry that it was such a rant, but I feel like these things are really important to talk about in storytelling, if only to make you aware, and I feel like they should be talked about more. Just because there's so many aspects in YA, especially I find, of lazy storytelling, and I want it to stop because there are so many things that I love about YA lit, but there are so many things that just drive me mental. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. If you have anything that you want me to talk about in future videos, especially concerning tropes, please leave it down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a happy and safe holiday.